Welcome again to American Christian or Christian American. I'm Sean Legacy and I'm your host. If you haven't watched my videos before, I would encourage you to go back and see some of the first ones, especially the first one, a few others. It will set some tone for what I'm doing here. You can still get an understanding of what I'm talking about, but it really sets the groundwork of everything I'm talking about because I talk about the beginning and who the first people were, and I provide evidences to the fact. So I would encourage you, if you can, go back and look at the first videos. I'm not as polished, perhaps, but I'm still giving information that is pertinent to what we're talking about. Uh, if you would also hit that subscribe button, it helps the channel grow, and also it can be easier for you to get the videos. And then if you like the video, please press the like button. That also helps the videos get spread out to more people to see that the videos are out there and choose to watch them. Well, today we're going to be talking about white privilege. And many people don't see it. Well, that's true. Why? Because white privilege is, in fact, the idea that you don't have to see it because it doesn't is pertinent to your life. We're going to watch a video first, and then I'm going to go off and talk more about different ideas about white privilege. So let's watch that video together.
What is white privilege? White privilege describes advantages and benefits people have simply because they are white. This privilege occurs on many levels in society. It is often not seen by white people because it's the experience they know. White privilege is interacting with the police and other authorities without fear of being profiled based on skin color. It's living in a neighborhood without facing discrimination. Having parks and grocery stores nearby. It's knowing you will be treated fairly by the teachers in your classroom. Recognizing white privilege acknowledges the injustices that Black, Indigenous, and people of color experience that white people don't. It does not mean white people live free of hardships, but that racism isn't one of them.
Is something that has been constructed over centuries. It even was constructed before Europeans came to America, but it really has gotten its fulfillment in America. What is white privilege? Well, you see, it's that just like the video said, interactions between white people, and officials usually goes just smoothly unless you're a law-breaking citizen. But with African Americans, you don't have to be a law-breaking citizen to have some uncomfortability with uh, law enforcement and otherwise. If a black person gets pulled over in a car for driving while black, or even a legitimate problem, they have to make sure they put their hands on the steering wheel. They can be seen because the cop generally is nervous. Now, it doesn't mean every cop, but there have been so many times that African American people have been shot and killed in a car because they were black, just because the cop got overly worked up. White people have more of a privilege to not be thought of as an automatic threat. Every other situation, a black person comes in, they're generally looked at as being guilty. A black man goes into an elevator. With a white woman, he can be in a suit and tie, carrying a briefcase, and she will clench her purse just because a black man walked into an elevator with her. How many black men have experienced this again and again and again? So white privilege is about going about your business and for the most part not having to worry about being scrutinized, that you might be a criminal, you might be this, that, or the other. You think back also, the idea that African Americans were enslaved in this country and people made billions of dollars off of enslaved people. Yes, the slave owners, right? Not just the slave owners. The slave owners sold their products to companies. Some of those companies are still around today. Then they sold that product overseas. They were making profits off of enslaved people, even though they particularly may not have had slaves. This country built wealth on free labor, on torture of human beings. And they not only built wealth for themselves, but they built generational wealth, wealth that we passed down through the generations. There are many individuals today that have wealth who owe that wealth to enslaved people because it came down generational from family member to family member. No, it may not be the actual dollars, or maybe it will be, but it's the idea that they had this money to invest, to make more money, to do things. Now, I'm not attacking the idea of present day people making money, except perhaps those who are just greedy and selfish and treat people wrong. But I'm talking about the privilege they had of having resources that their ancestors could pass down to them, where African Americans did not have. Not only that, but African Americans continue to have racial inequalities and discrimination through the generations and still going on today. So, while an African American might build some generational wealth, it is very difficult to do so because it is much more difficult for the original person who's building wealth to start in the first place. They have to work 10 times as hard to do so. And the society finds more and more ways to keep them poor or to keep them to the point, and it does this to other people as well, but it's much more acute with minorities. White people don't have to think about all the things that minorities have to think about. And that's just privilege right there. They have the privilege not to think about it. A white person doesn't even have to think about whether they have white privilege because they're not attacked in the same way that an African American has. They have to pay attention to racism, to everything else, because they are the targets, or at least one of the targets. That's white privilege, that you can go on your life and not think about it if you don't want to. You don't have to bother with African Americans for the most part if you don't want to. Oh, you might encounter them at work and everything else, but you don't have to associate with them. You don't have to do this. You can go with your white friends. You can go just about anywhere and not have to worry about it. Now, there is an idea out here, a ridiculous idea, that people in this country put out there is white discrimination. Absolutely ridiculous. Why do they say white discrimination? Well, here's the thing. Let's use an example of a prince. I'm not picking on any prince particularly. I'm not talking about Prince William or Prince Harry from England. I'm just picking a prince, the role of a prince, and a fictitious prince at that, but with the same concepts that they are elite in a royal family where they are considered to be above others, the commoners. They are treated specially. They have servants all around them who make their beds, who turn down their beds, who make their meals. And in fact, they could change the channel for them on the TV. They don't have to do that if they don't want to. They are treated above other people. Now, let's say you take a prince, and for whatever reason, he is stripped of all of these things. And now what is he? He's a common, everyday person. He's been stripped of his titles, he's been stripped of that. Now, he still probably has his name, and people still may recognize him. But let's just say for the moment, he's stripped of all these things, and he goes out and gets a job, or tries to get a job, and he may not have the education. Let's go with that first. But as he applies for the job, somebody else gets the job. And then he says he's being discriminated against because he is a prince or was a prince. Does that sound ridiculous to you? Now, let's say the man is qualified, perfectly qualified, and he goes along and there's another man who's perfectly qualified. And I'm not saying African American, I'm just saying anybody. And just because he doesn't get the job, because somebody has to pick between the two people, he thinks he's being discriminated because he is or was a prince. Now, in many cases, the reverse probably would happen, that the prince probably would get picked if he was qualified because of his prestige. Not always. But the idea that he could claim that he's being discriminated against is ridiculous. The same thing goes with a white person who has all this privilege in this country. And when we've had diversity and inclusion and affirmative action and other things, so that African American people could get jobs because they weren't being looked at, they were being ignored. They wouldn't hire African Americans in this country unless they ran out of white people. So the idea that this white person has to come down to an even playing field, that they're being discriminated against, is ridiculous. But here's the idea: this person is locked into the idea that I am superior to him. So now, because of some law, you're picking him over me. As Charlie Kirk said, that whenever a black person, for the most part, got a job, especially a well job, that he was taking a white man's job or a white person's job. Because in his mind, white people are superior. White people created everything. White people have done everything. And that only white people should inherit the jobs and everything else. Let's look at another clip I made about some of those facts. The true story of Louis Latimer, the inventor who made electric lights possible. Okay, he played a pivotal role in the invention of the modern light bulb and telephone and was the only black member of the Thomas Edison's elite research team. But who was Louis Latimer? Let's go down. You can look up this stuff for yourself, but I want to focus on a particular area. And this is the drawings for the light bulbs and lamps. Latimer became intimately familiar with the way electricity incandescent lighting worked. Eventually, he began to come up with some ideas of his own and tried his hand at inventing. At the time, Thomas Edison's light bulb, which contained a filament made from bamboo, lasted only a few days and had to be replaced frequently. Interesting engineering reports. So Latimer decided to improve on Edison's design. While experimenting with a new light bulb filament, he wrapped a carbon filament in a cardboard so it would burn longer, which also meant that it wouldn't need to be replaced as frequently. Latimer's patented the invention, and his designs revolutionized incandescent light bulb, helping to bring down the cost of light bulbs and speed up the spread of electric lights across the country. Now light bulbs were more available to the public and for use in their homes. He also had a lot to do with Alexander Graham Bell inventions of the telephone. He helped him to come up with some of the ideas. And so we have to understand that black people have contributed a great deal to inventions. Now, there's so many documentations about this. We don't have time to go through all of them, but this is important. So, is it true that Thomas Edison invented a light bulb? Yes. Remember, though, he had a team of people working with him. But his light bulb was impractical. It had a bamboo filament and only lasted a couple days. And of course, in any invention, when something's new and not enough people are buying it, it costs more to make a profit. And so therefore, the cost of this light bulb would have been very high for relative to the time. That being said, if you have to replace a light bulb every day, that the people who would use these light bulbs would probably be the affluent. Louis Latimer actually invented a practical light bulb that would last extraordinarily much longer. If you read different articles on Louis Latimer, you can search him up and find true things that have been documented about him. He helped invent a light bulb, and he got a patent on it that actually helped the modern light bulb to evolve. it was much easier for a person, even if they had to spend a decent amount of money on this light bulb, they could be guaranteed that the light bulb was going to last a lot longer than Edison's. And so Edison wouldn't have become famous, really, if it wasn't for Louis Latimer. But in modern society, who hears about Louis Latimer? We hear about Thomas Edison. So because he was white, he could get credit for things much easier than the man who actually invented something that worked properly. Louis Latimer also had an impact on the telephone and everything else. He had so many different things, and there are many other black people who have invented things. Now, am I saying that white people aren't capable of inventing things? No, not at all. But it does give us a problem. With all the different inventions that have been stolen by white people who have taken credit for something else, was somebody else invented it, an African American person, or at least the African American person had a large impact on that invention, and at the very least they should have got shared credit, but other times they should have got all of the credit. uh, it was stolen. So it's not that white people or Caucasian people can't invent, but when you spend more of your time holding people down and stealing other people's inventions, you perhaps don't have the energy or the focus or the direction to be as creative as somebody else who has to really work hard in their life. Think about it this: it's like a plantation owner saying that he had to work hard all day when his slaves were doing all the work. All right, so this is all part of white privilege. White people have the ability to make it easier in our society, especially in the past. It's still a struggle today. White people have had the upper hand. That's why racism can only be accomplished by white people. If you understand the term racism, racism is about having the power to dictate education, financial power, and social power, uh, and political power. White people had an incredible amount of power that black people do not have over white people. At the very least, black people could come up to try to help be part of a system, but they are not anywhere near having the ability to discriminate against white people. Now, on an individual basis, that might be true, but that's not racism. Racism is a more of a group of people and controlling the other people. An individual thing is about prejudice, maybe dehumanization or something like that. But it that can happen in an individual, but racism is about a system of control and power. It's a system that we are all born into. It is a system that every Caucasian person in this country is destined to be a racist because our institutions teach racism, whether you know it or not. Our society teaches how great the founding fathers were. And they weren't great at all. They were racist men who supported slavery, who supported wealth off the backs of other human beings. And there was much more to them than that. But we continuously teach this stuff. White privilege, really part of big white privilege is not having to think about other people and only think about yourself. But when you whine and complain that you're being discriminated against, that is utterly preposterous. White people are still getting jobs. African Americans deserve to have jobs too. They deserve to compete. We have to get over the fact that we are up here. We are not. We are right here. And so if we were all competing for the jobs, fine. Now, if all the companies started hiring only African Americans, okay, maybe that's discrimination. But when African Americans get an equal shot, or at least closer to being equal, because I don't believe it's equal even yet, but a closer to being equal, that's not discrimination. You call it discrimination because the fact that any job goes to an African American and not to a white person is not right in your mind because you think you're better than other people, or at least that's what many people are doing. I hope if you're watching this that you're not thinking that way. But if you are, I'm hoping something I said, even if I didn't say it the best way, will help you to consider it and to realize that you are important to God and to the society, but you are not more important. You are not inferior to African Americans and Native Americans, but you are certainly not superior. Until the next time, an American Christian or Christian American.